I never thought the most beautiful day of my sister's life would become the day I finally understood what it meant to be truly alone in a family. The morning light filtered through the windows of our Chicago apartment, painting everything in shades of gold. I stood in the kitchen, watching my daughter Lily bent over her sketch pad at the breakfast table, her small fingers clutching a charcoal pencil with the intensity of someone 3 times her age. She was working on a drawing of the city skyline, the buildings rising from the page with a precision that still amazed me after all these years. At 9 years old, Lily had already won 2 local art competitions, and her work had been featured in a community gallery downtown. She was extraordinary, and not just because I was her mother. I poured myself another cup of coffee, savoring the quiet moment before the chaos of the day would inevitably begin. My phone buzzed on the counter. Rebecca, my younger sister. I smiled as I picked it up, expecting her usual pre-wedding jitters. She was getting married in 3 weeks, and I had been helping her coordinate everything from my end, even though the ceremony would take place back home in Boston, where our family still lived. "Hey, can we talk?" The text was short, which wasn't unusual for Rebecca, but something about the tone felt different. I called her immediately. The conversation started normally enough. She asked about the flight arrangements, confirmed that I had received the updated schedule for the rehearsal dinner, and then there was a pause, a long one. In that silence, I heard something shift, like the moment before a storm, when the air pressure drops and you know something is coming. "Amelia, there's something we need to discuss," Rebecca said finally, her voice tight. "It's about Lily." My stomach dropped. "What about Lily?" Another pause. "Mom and David think, well, we think it might be better if Lily doesn't come to the wedding." I must have heard her wrong. The coffee cup in my hand suddenly felt too heavy. "What do you mean, doesn't come to the wedding? She's your niece. She's been so excited about this." "I know, and I love her. You know I do," Rebecca said quickly, the words tumbling out. "But this is a really formal event. David's family is very traditional, very prominent in Boston society. There will be a lot of important people there, and Mom is worried about, well, about how it would look. How it would look. 3 words that made my blood run cold. I set the coffee cup down carefully, afraid I might throw it. "Rebecca, Lily is 9 years old. She's your niece. What exactly are you worried about how it would look?" My sister's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Mom says having an adopted child there, especially one who's, from a different background, might raise questions. People might talk. David's parents are already a bit concerned about the optics. The optics." I gripped the edge of the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. Lily, who I had adopted when she was 3 years old after working as a volunteer at an orphanage in Guatemala, who had come into my life and transformed it completely, who called me Mom and meant it with every fiber of her being, was apparently a problem of optics. "I'm not doing this over the phone," I said, my voice deadly calm. "I'm coming to Boston. We're gonna have this conversation face to face." I hung up before Rebecca could respond. Behind me, Lily looked up from her drawing, sensing something was wrong. "Mom, are you okay?" I turned and forced a smile, walking over to her and kissing the top of her head. "Everything's fine, sweetheart. How's the skyline coming along?" She showed me the drawing, pointing out the details she had added to the John Hancock Tower. I praised her work, asked her questions about her technique, and pretended that my world wasn't cracking apart at the seams. When she went back to drawing, I pulled out my phone and booked the earliest flight to Boston I could find. The next morning, Lily and I were on a plane. I had told her we were going to visit Grandma and help with some last-minute wedding preparations. She was thrilled, chattering about seeing Aunt Rebecca's dress and maybe getting to help arrange flowers. I listened to her excitement and felt my resolve harden into something unbreakable. We landed at Logan International Airport in the early afternoon. Instead of going to my mother's house in Beacon Hill as planned, I dropped Lily off with my friend Jennifer, who had moved to Boston for graduate school and still lived in Cambridge. I told Lily I had some quick wedding errands to run and would be back in a few hours. She was happy to spend time with Jennifer, who always spoiled her with art supplies and baked goods. I drove to my childhood home with my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly they ached. The house looked exactly as it always had, a beautiful brownstone on a tree-lined street where every family had old money and older grudges. I had grown up here, walked these streets, played in that park across the road. It should have felt like coming home. Instead, it felt like walking into a battlefield. My mother opened the door before I could knock. Catherine Monroe had always been elegant, always composed, always aware of how she appeared to others. Today she wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent, her silver hair perfectly styled, her expression carefully neutral. "Eleanor, I wasn't expecting you until tomorrow," she said, stepping aside to let me in. "You should have called." I walked past her into the foyer, that familiar space with its marble floors and crystal chandelier. "We need to talk. Now. Where's Rebecca?" "She's here. And David." My mother's voice was clipped. "I assume this is about the wedding arrangements. You mean about how you're trying to exclude my daughter from her own aunt's wedding?" Yes, I'd say that's what this is about. My mother's jaw tightened. Let's discuss this in the living room. There's no need to be dramatic. Dramatic. That word had been used against me my entire life. Dramatic when I chose to major in architecture instead of business. Dramatic when I decided to volunteer abroad instead of immediately joining the family's real estate firm. Dramatic when I adopted Lily. I was so tired of being called dramatic for simply living my life on my own terms. Rebecca and David were waiting in the living room. My sister looked uncomfortable, her hands twisting in her lap. David stood by the fireplace, looking every inch the Boston Brahmin he was, with his prep school posture and his family's shipping fortune behind him. He barely acknowledged me when I entered. I stayed standing, refusing to sit and pretend this was a civil conversation. Say it to my face, Rebecca. Tell me why you don't want Lily at your wedding. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears, but I felt no sympathy. Amelia, please understand. This wedding is so important. There are going to be over 300 guests. The governor is coming. David's family has connections to some of the oldest families in New England. We've worked so hard to make everything perfect, and my daughter being there would make it imperfect? I said the words slowly, wanting them to understand the weight of what they were saying. David stepped forward. Let me be frank, Eleanor. This wedding is not just a celebration. It's a networking opportunity. It's a statement about the kind of family we're building. Having a child who so obviously doesn't belong to the family bloodline raises questions about our values, our choices. It's a distraction. A distraction. My daughter, with her brilliant mind and kind heart and extraordinary talent, was a distraction. I turned to my mother. And you agree with this? Catherine sat down on the sofa, crossing her legs elegantly. I understand you love Lily. No one is questioning that. But you need to think about the bigger picture. This wedding is about Rebecca and David's future, their position in society. The impression we make matters. Surely you can see that bringing Lily would be, well, awkward for everyone. Awkward, I repeated. My daughter would be awkward. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. You're asking me to tell my 9-year-old daughter that she can't go to her aunt's wedding because her presence might embarrass you in front of your fancy friends? That's not what we're saying, Rebecca protested weakly. Then what are you saying? I demanded. Use clear words, Rebecca. Tell me exactly what you mean. The room fell silent. Finally, David spoke, his voice cold and precise. What we're saying is that your decision to adopt a child from Central America, while admirable in its own way, was your choice. We didn't have a say in it, and now we're asking you to respect our choices for our wedding. You're welcome to attend. Lily is not. I felt something break inside me then, some last thread of hope that my family might actually care about something beyond their precious reputation. I looked at my mother, at my sister, at this man who was about to become part of our family, and I saw them clearly for perhaps the first time in my life. My brother Robert appeared in the doorway. I hadn't realized he was home. He must have heard everything. The look on his face was uncomfortable, embarrassed, but he said nothing. That silence was almost worse than the words. Fine, I said quietly. I understand perfectly now. You've made your priorities very clear. Amelia, be reasonable, my mother started. I held up a hand to stop her. No. I'm done being reasonable. I'm done trying to fit into this family's narrow definition of acceptable. I'm done explaining and justifying and apologizing for choosing love over bloodlines. You want to know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take my daughter, my brilliant, beautiful, talented daughter, and we're going to leave. And I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of family you really are. You wouldn't dare, David said, his voice sharp with warning. Watch me, I replied. I turned and walked out of that house, out of that suffocating atmosphere of judgment and pretension, and I didn't look back. In my car, I sat for a moment, breathing hard, my hands shaking with rage and hurt, and a strange sense of liberation. Then I pulled out my phone and called Olivia. Olivia Chen had been my best friend since college. She was a successful event planner in Boston, known for her creativity and her ability to make any event unforgettable. She had always understood me, had celebrated when I adopted Lily, had been there through every major moment of my life. If anyone could help me with what I was planning, it was her. I need your help, I said when she answered. And it's going to be big. Olivia listened as I explained everything. The conversation with my family, their demands, their casual cruelty disguised as practical concerns. When I finished, there was a long pause. Those absolute assholes, Olivia said finally. Tell me what you need. I want to show them exactly who Lily is. I want everyone who comes to that wedding to see what they're excluding. I want to make a statement they'll never forget. Olivia was quiet for a moment, and I could practically hear her mind working. I have an idea, but it's going to take some work, and you're going to have to trust me. I trust you completely. What do you have in mind? Over the next 2 weeks, Olivia and I worked on a plan. Through her connections, she managed to secure a permit for a small public art installation space directly adjacent to the wedding venue, a historic hotel in downtown Boston. The space was technically public property, a small plaza that the hotel used for outdoor events, but it was available for community art projects. Olivia filed all the paperwork through proper channels, making sure everything was completely legal and above board. Meanwhile, I spent hours gathering Lily's artwork. She had been creating since she was old enough to hold a crayon, and I had saved everything. Her early finger paintings full of wild color, her elementary school watercolors of our neighborhood, her recent charcoal sketches of the Chicago skyline, detailed architectural drawings that showed a sophistication far beyond her years. Her winning entry from the community art contest, a mixed media piece about finding home. I selected the best pieces and had them professionally photographed and printed. I also wrote. For hours, late into the night after Lily was asleep, I poured out everything I felt. About the day I first met her at the orphanage, this tiny 3-year-old with enormous brown eyes who had grabbed my hand and refused to let go. About the paperwork and the home visits and the months of waiting until I could finally bring her home. About watching her blossom from a shy, traumatized child into a confident, creative force of nature. About every moment of joy she had brought into my life. About what it meant to choose love over biology, to build a family based on commitment rather than blood. The installation came together beautifully. Olivia worked her magic, transforming the plaza into a gallery space. We hung Lily's artwork on professional display boards, each piece lit with careful attention. In the center, we placed a large screen that would display a rotating slideshow of photos. Lily painting, Lily laughing, Lily receiving her award at the art competition, Lily simply being the amazing child she was. And on a prominent wall, we mounted my letter, printed large enough to be read from several feet away. The title of the installation was simple: Beauty Without Borders, A Young Artist's Journey. I didn't tell Lily what we were doing. I didn't want her to feel like she was being used to make a point, or that she needed to be defended. As far as she knew, we were just setting up a surprise art show, which was true in a way. She helped us select which pieces to display, excited about the idea of showing her work to a larger audience. The day of the wedding arrived. It was a perfect Boston spring day, the kind that makes you remember why people endure the brutal winters. The sky was brilliantly blue, the trees in full bloom, the city alive with possibility. Olivia and I arrived at the plaza early in the morning to make the final preparations. By noon, everything was ready. The installation looked stunning, professional and moving and impossible to ignore. Anyone approaching the hotel for the wedding would have to walk past it. We had also quietly notified a few local reporters and bloggers who covered community events and social issues. I wasn't sure if any of them would come, but I hoped they might. At 2 p.m, Lily and I took our positions. She wore a beautiful blue dress that matched her eyes, her dark hair pulled back with a flower clip. She didn't fully understand what was happening, but she was excited to be part of an art show. I had explained that some people coming to Aunt Rebecca's wedding might stop to look at her work, and she thought that was wonderful. The wedding guests began arriving around 3. I watched as they came up the street in their expensive clothes and their air of self-importance, and I waited. Some of them walked right past, too focused on getting inside to notice, but others stopped. They looked at the artwork, they read the descriptions, they watched the slideshow of photos. One woman, elderly and elegant, spent several minutes studying Lily's charcoal cityscape. She turned to Lily and said, "Did you really draw this yourself, dear?" When Lily nodded proudly and began explaining her technique, the woman listened with genuine interest and then proclaimed it remarkable. More people stopped. A couple in their 40s spent a long time reading my letter on the wall. The woman had tears in her eyes when she finished. They approached me and introduced themselves as friends of David's family. "We had no idea," the woman said softly. "This is beautiful. Your daughter is incredibly talented." Then my family arrived. I saw my mother first, stepping out of a black town car, followed by my father and Robert. My father, William Monroe, had been mostly silent through this whole ordeal, as he was on most family matters, deferring to my mother's judgments. He spotted the installation first, and I saw his steps falter. "Catherine," he said, and my mother turned to see what he was looking at. I watched her face go pale, then flush red with anger. She said something sharp to Robert, who looked uncomfortable but said nothing. They hurried into the hotel, but not before several other guests noticed their reaction and turned to see what had upset them. Rebecca and David arrived 15 minutes later in a white limousine, ready for their grand entrance. The photographer was with them, preparing to capture their arrival. But Rebecca stopped dead when she saw the installation. She stood there, frozen, staring at the display of Lily's artwork, at the photos of her niece, at my words printed large for everyone to see. David's reaction was pure fury. He started toward us, but Olivia stepped smoothly into his path. "Sir, this is a legal public art installation with all proper permits. If you interfere with it, I'll have to call the police." She said it loudly enough for several nearby guests to hear. David stopped, clearly torn between his anger and the need to maintain his image in front of the gathering crowd. Rebecca was crying, her carefully applied makeup starting to run. The photographer looked confused, not sure if he should be documenting this or not. My mother emerged from the hotel, having apparently heard about the confrontation. She stormed toward me, her face a mask of controlled rage. "Eleanor Monroe, what do you think you're doing?" I stepped forward to meet her, standing protectively near Lily. "I'm showing everyone who my daughter really is. I'm letting them see what you wanted to hide, her talent, her beauty, her worth. Everything you decided wasn't good enough for your precious reputation. You're ruining your sister's wedding," Catherine hissed. "No," I said clearly, aware that people were watching and listening. "You ruined it when you decided that a child's presence was more of a threat to your social standing than excluding her was to your humanity." "I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth." A man I didn't recognize stepped forward. He introduced himself as James Whitmore, from the Boston Herald. He had been invited to cover the wedding as a society event, but this story had just become much more interesting. "Miss Monroe, would you be willing to give a statement about this installation and its connection to today's wedding?" Before I could answer, Robert finally spoke up. He had been standing at the edge of the confrontation, but now he moved closer. "Mom, stop! This is wrong! We were wrong!" He looked at me, and I saw genuine regret in his eyes. "Eleanor, I'm sorry. I should have said something 2 weeks ago. I should have stood up for Lily then. I was a coward. And I'm ashamed of it." "Robert," my mother said sharply, but he shook his head. "No, Mom. I'm done pretending this is okay. Lily is family. She should have been welcomed, celebrated. Instead, we treated her like an embarrassment. That's on us, not on Eleanor." The crowd of onlookers had grown. Wedding guests, curious passersby, hotel staff, a few more reporters who had gotten word of the scene. Lily, still not fully understanding what was happening, stood beside me holding my hand. She was being so brave, sensing that this was important even if she didn't know why. David tried one more time to take control of the situation. "This is inappropriate and manipulative. You're trying to sabotage our wedding because you're bitter." I turned to face him fully. "I'm trying to show everyone what you really value. You're about to stand up in front of all these people and make promises about love and family and commitment. But when it came time to show actual love to a child, to family, you failed. You chose appearances over acceptance. You chose your social calendar over basic human decency. I'm not sabotaging anything. I'm just refusing to be silent about it." "Miss Monroe," the reporter said again, and this time I nodded. I gave him a brief statement about the installation, about Lily's talent, about the importance of creating families built on love rather than exclusion. I kept it dignified but honest. I didn't have to exaggerate or embellish. The facts spoke for themselves. Other guests began approaching the installation, drawn by the commotion. They looked at Lily's art, they read my letter. Many of them seemed moved, uncomfortable, questioning what they were witnessing. I heard whispered conversations, saw exchanging glances. The narrative that was supposed to define this wedding was slipping away from my mother's carefully maintained control. Rebecca finally approached me, David held back by Olivia's stern gaze and the presence of photographers. Rebecca's face was blotchy with tears, her expression a mixture of anger, hurt, and something that might have been shame. "Amelia, please, you've made your point. Can we please just move past this? It's my wedding day, and it's Lily's family," I replied. "You wanted to exclude her. You don't get to have it both ways, Rebecca. You don't get to push her out and then ask for peace when it becomes inconvenient." "I didn't want this," Rebecca said, her voice breaking. "Mom and David said it would be easier." "You're a grown woman about to get married," I said. "You made a choice. Now you have to live with it." The wedding proceeded, but the damage was done. The energy was wrong, the mood tainted by the scene outside. Many guests seemed distracted, uncomfortable. I heard later that the ceremony itself was lovely but felt hollow somehow, as if everyone was going through the motions while thinking about what had happened beforehand. Lily and I stayed at the installation for another 2 hours. We talked to people who stopped by, answered questions about her art, accepted compliments on her work. She was radiant, energized by the positive attention. She didn't need to know that this had all started as an act of defiance. For her, it was simply a day when people appreciated her talent, and that was exactly what I wanted. The story spread faster than I anticipated. The reporter from the Herald published a piece the next day, complete with photos of Lily's artwork and excerpts from my letter. The headline read, "Wedding Exclusion Sparks Public Art Installation Celebrating Adopted Child's Talent." The article was sympathetic to our position, questioning the family's decision to exclude Lily and praising her obvious artistic abilities. Social media picked it up from there. Within 48 hours, the story had gone viral. People across the country were sharing it, commenting on it, taking sides. The overwhelming majority supported Lily and condemned my family's actions. Parenting blogs wrote think pieces about adoption and family dynamics. Art communities celebrated Lily's work and called for more recognition of young artists from diverse backgrounds. The hashtag Beauty Without Borders began trending. My mother called me 3 days after the wedding. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Are you satisfied now? She asked without preamble. You've humiliated this family in front of the entire city. Rebecca is devastated. David's family is furious. We've had to field calls from everyone we know, all asking about this situation. Good, I said calmly. Maybe you should tell them the truth. That you valued your reputation more than your granddaughter. She is not my granddaughter, Catherine said, and I heard the ice in her voice. She's a child you decided to bring into this family without consulting anyone. We had no obligation to pretend otherwise. You had an obligation to be decent human beings, I replied. You failed. And now everyone knows it. I hung up before she could respond. My hands weren't shaking this time. I felt calm, clear, certain of my choices in a way I hadn't in years. The fallout continued for weeks. David's family business faced some backlash, with several clients questioning their values. Rebecca's social media accounts, which had been full of wedding photos and congratulations, became filled with critical comments. People she had considered friends began distancing themselves, unwilling to be associated with the controversy. Robert reached out several times. He apologized again, more fully this time, acknowledging his complicity in the situation. He asked if there was any way to make amends with Lily. I told him I'd think about it, but that he would have to prove his sincerity over time, not just with words but with consistent actions. The most unexpected consequence was what happened to Lily. The attention around the story led to genuine opportunities for her. She was invited to participate in a summer art program for gifted young artists at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts. A gallery in Chicago reached out about featuring her work in a group show celebrating young artists from immigrant backgrounds. A local newspaper wanted to do a profile about her artistic journey. My daughter, who had been deemed not good enough to attend a wedding, was suddenly being recognized and celebrated by people who actually mattered. She was thriving in ways that had nothing to do with my family's approval or lack thereof. 6 months after the wedding, I received a letter from my mother. It was formal, stiff, carefully worded. She acknowledged that perhaps they had handled the situation poorly. She suggested that maybe, in time, we could find a way to move forward as a family. She noted that Lily's accomplishments were impressive. The letter never once included an actual apology. I didn't respond. I wasn't interested in a hollow reconciliation based on the fact that Lily had proven herself worthy by external standards. She had always been worthy. They had simply been too blind to see it. Instead, Olivia and I organized something better. We created a foundation called Beauty Without Borders, dedicated to supporting young artists from underrepresented communities. We held fundraisers, established scholarships, created mentorship programs. Lily became the foundation's first youth ambassador, sharing her story and encouraging other children to pursue their creative passions regardless of their backgrounds. The foundation grew beyond anything I had imagined. We partnered with schools and community centers across Chicago and eventually in other cities. We provided art supplies to kids who couldn't afford them, funded classes and workshops, organized exhibitions that gave young artists a platform to showcase their work. Every child who came through our doors was treated as valuable, as worthy, as belonging. Rebecca reached out once, about a year after the wedding. She said she was sorry, that she had been wrong, that she let herself be influenced by others instead of standing up for what was right. She wanted to see Lily, to rebuild their relationship. I told her the truth, that it wasn't up to me to grant or deny that relationship, but that she would have to earn back Lily's trust. Lily was old enough now to understand, at least in part, what had happened. She knew that some people in our family had not wanted her at the wedding. She knew that I had fought for her. And she would decide, as she got older, who deserved to be part of her life. Robert followed through on his promises. He started coming to Chicago regularly, making an effort to know Lily as a person, not as a symbol or a source of conflict. He attended her art shows, sent her books about famous artists, video called to hear about her day. Slowly, carefully, he built a relationship with her based on genuine care and respect. I watched it happen and allowed it, because Lily deserved to have family who loved her for who she was. My father remained mostly silent through everything, which felt appropriate somehow. He had been mostly silent my entire life, letting my mother set the tone for the family, going along with her decisions even when they were cruel. His passivity was its own form of failure, and I couldn't forgive it any more easily than I could forgive my mother's act of cruelty. Lily is 12 now. She's tall for her age, confident in ways I never was at that age. Her artwork has continued to evolve, becoming more sophisticated and more deeply personal. She created a series of mixed media pieces about identity and belonging that were featured in a major exhibition about immigrant stories. She speaks at our foundation events, inspiring other kids with her story and her talent. Sometimes, when I watch her working in her studio space in our apartment, completely absorbed in her creative process, I think about that day at the wedding. I think about the choice I made to publicly challenge my family, to refuse to be silenced or compliant. Some people have criticized me for it, saying I was too harsh, too public, too unforgiving. They argue that I should have handled it privately, that I should have been the bigger person, that I should have protected my family's dignity. But I did protect my family. I protected the family that mattered, my daughter and me. I showed her that she was worth fighting for, that her value was not up for debate, that she deserved to be defended fiercely and publicly. I taught her that love means action, not just words, and that sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones we're supposed to be able to trust. The relationship with my birth family remains fractured. My mother and I have not spoken in over 2 years. Rebecca sends occasional messages that I rarely respond to. David and his family remain distant, nursing their wounded pride. The Monroe family reputation, once so carefully cultivated, has been permanently altered by the scandal. Some see them as victims of an ungrateful, vindictive daughter. More see them as examples of how prejudice and elitism can corrupt even the bonds of family. I don't regret what I did, not for a single moment. Because every time I see Lily creating something beautiful, every time she tells me about her day with confidence and joy, every time she stands up for herself or someone else who's being treated unfairly, I know I made the right choice. She knows her story now. She knows that she was excluded from a family event because of who she is, where she came from, the color of her skin, and the circumstances of her birth. She also knows that I refused to accept that exclusion, that I fought back in the most public way possible. She knows that sometimes love means burning bridges, challenging authority, and making scenes when scenes need to be made. Last week, we were working together on materials for the Foundation's annual fundraising gala. Lily was designing the event poster, a vibrant collage that incorporated elements from artwork created by kids in our programs. As she worked, she said something that made me pause. "Mom, do you ever wish things had turned out differently? Like that your family had just accepted me from the beginning and we could all be together?" I thought about it carefully before answering. Sometimes I wish they had been different people, capable of seeing how special you are, but I don't wish I had made different choices. Everything I did because you deserved someone who would fight for you without hesitation. You deserved to know you were worth fighting for. She looked at me with those enormous brown eyes that had captured my heart 9 years ago. "I'm glad you're my mom. I'm glad you're my daughter," I replied. The gala was a tremendous success. We raised enough money to fund 3 new community art centers and expand our scholarship program to reach twice as many students. Lily gave a speech about the importance of supporting young artists and creating spaces where every child feels valued and seen. She spoke with poise and passion, and the audience gave her a standing ovation. Among the attendees was a reporter from a national parenting magazine who had been following our foundation's work. She approached me afterward and asked if I would be willing to be interviewed for a feature story about non-traditional families and the power of chosen bonds. I agreed. The article was published 3 months later. It was titled "When Love Means Letting Go: A Mother's Choice to Protect Her Daughter Over Preserving Family Ties." It included photos of Lily and me at the foundation, excerpts from my perspective on building family through commitment rather than biology, and testimonials from kids whose lives had been changed by our programs. The magazine's cover featured one of Lily's paintings, a stunning abstract piece about the concept of home. My mother saw the article. I know because Robert told me. He said she had sat in her living room, reading it from start to finish without saying a word. When she finished, she had simply folded the magazine closed and walked away. She didn't comment on it, didn't acknowledge it, didn't reach out to me. Her silence said everything. Rebecca called after the article came out. She had read it too. And this time her voice carried a different quality. Not defensiveness or self-pity, but genuine reflection. "You were right," she said simply. "About everything. I was a coward. I let Mom and David make me into someone I didn't want to be. I let them convince me that appearances mattered more than people. I've been going to therapy, trying to understand why I went along with it. Why I hurt Lily and you when I knew it was wrong." I listened without interrupting. This was the most honest Rebecca had been in years. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she continued. "I'm not sure I deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. What I did, what we did, and I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to become someone who would have made a different choice." I appreciated the words, but I also knew that words were easy. Actions were what mattered. I told her that if she wanted to be part of our lives, she would have to prove it over time. No grand gestures, no dramatic reconciliations, just consistent, genuine effort to know Lily as a person and to support the work we were doing. She agreed. Slowly, tentatively, Rebecca started showing up. She volunteered at our foundation events. She donated to our programs. She sent Lily letters about her own attempts to be braver, more authentic, more willing to stand up for what was right. Lily, with the generous heart of a child who hasn't yet learned to hold grudges, began to cautiously accept these overtures. I remained protective, watchful. Trust, once broken so thoroughly, is not easily rebuilt. But I also recognize that people can change, can grow, can learn from their failures. Rebecca seems to be trying, and that effort deserves acknowledgement if not immediate forgiveness. The foundation continues to thrive. We've helped hundreds of young artists access resources and opportunities they wouldn't have had otherwise. We've created safe spaces where children from all backgrounds can express themselves creatively without judgment or exclusion. Every single child who walks through our doors is treated as valuable, as worthy of support and celebration. This work has become my greatest accomplishment, beyond any building I've designed or award I've won. It's a direct response to what my family tried to do to Lily, a way of ensuring that other children never feel the pain of being deemed not good enough. It's proof that something beautiful can grow from even the ugliest situations, that wounds can become wisdom, that exclusion can inspire inclusion. Lily wants to expand the foundation internationally when she's older. She talks about creating programs in Guatemala, the country where she was born, and in other places where children need access to art education and creative opportunities. She wants to help other kids find their voices through art the way she found hers. I have no doubt she'll make it happen. She has the talent, the passion, and the determination to change the world. On the third anniversary of that infamous wedding day, Lily and I did something special. We returned to Boston, to that same plaza where we had set up the installation. This time, with proper planning and coordination with the city, we organized a large-scale public art event. Young artists from across New England came to display their work, to perform, to celebrate creativity without boundaries. The event was called Beauty Without Borders Festival, and it drew thousands of people. Local businesses sponsored it. Schools brought students on field trips. Media outlets covered it as a positive community story. It was everything that wedding was supposed to be, elegant and meaningful and memorable, but it was built on inclusion rather than exclusion, on celebration rather than judgment. My mother and father were invited. They didn't come. Rebecca came, though, with flowers for Lily and tears in her eyes. She apologized again, in front of everyone, acknowledging publicly what she had done and what she had learned from it. Lily accepted her apology with grace and thanked her for coming. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was a step, and sometimes steps are all we can ask for. David didn't come either. I heard through Robert that the marriage was struggling. The foundation built on appearances and social climbing had proven unstable when tested by real adversity. They were in counseling, trying to decide if there was anything genuine beneath the facade they had constructed. I felt no satisfaction in hearing this, only a sad recognition that people who build their lives on superficial values rarely find lasting happiness. Robert brought his new girlfriend to the festival, a kind woman named Sarah who worked as a public defender. She spent an hour talking with Lily about art and justice, and using creativity to advocate for change. I watched my brother with this woman, seeing him more relaxed and authentic than I had ever seen him with our family. He had chosen differently too, in his own way. He was building a life based on his values, rather than our mother's expectations. The festival became an annual event. Each year it grew larger, attracted more artists, reached more people. It became a symbol of Boston's commitment to diversity and inclusion in the arts. The plaza that had once been the site of my act of defiance became a space synonymous with celebration and acceptance. Every year, we honored young artists who had overcome barriers to pursue their creative dreams. Every year, Lily stood on that stage and spoke about belonging, about worth, about the families we build through choice and commitment. I still design buildings. My architecture firm has grown, and I'm known now for creating community spaces that prioritize accessibility and inclusion. I design community centers, schools, libraries, places where everyone is welcome. Every project I take on reflects what I learned from that experience with my family, that the spaces we create and the boundaries we establish say everything about our values. Lily is applying to art schools now. She's considering programs in New York, California, even some international options. She's talented enough to go anywhere she wants, and I know she'll choose wisely. She's learned to trust her instincts, to value herself, to demand respect from the people in her life. Those are lessons I'm proud to have taught her, even though I learned them far too late in my own life. Sometimes people ask me if I would do anything differently. If I would have been less confrontational, less public, less dramatic in my response to my family's rejection. The answer is always no. Because that moment, standing in that plaza with my daughter's artwork surrounding us, refusing to be silent about injustice even when it was uncomfortable and messy in public, that was the moment I finally became the mother Lily deserved. I protected her not just with love but with action. I showed her that her worth was non-negotiable, that her place in our family was secure, that I would burn down any bridge and weather any storm to ensure she knew she was valued. Those are not lessons you can teach with quiet conversations behind closed doors. Sometimes love requires grand gestures, public stands, and the willingness to lose people who were never truly family in any meaningful sense. My relationship with my parents remains severed. My mother sends cards on holidays, formal and impersonal, signed with her name but containing no real warmth or acknowledgement of what she did. My father remains silent, as always. I don't expect reconciliation, and I've made peace with that. Some wounds don't heal because healing would require an admission of harm that certain people are incapable of making. But I've built something better than reconciliation. I've built a family based on chosen love and mutual respect. Olivia is Lily's godmother, present at every milestone and celebration. Jennifer, my friend from Cambridge, has become like an aunt to Lily. Robert and Sarah are part of our lives now, reliable and supportive in ways that matter. We've created a network of people who show up, who celebrate Lily for who she is, who understand that family is something you build through actions, not something you inherit through accident of birth. Last month, Lily received a full scholarship to the Rhode Island School of Design, one of the most prestigious art schools in the country. When the letter came, we screamed and cried and danced around our living room. Then we called everyone who mattered to share the news: Robert and Sarah, Olivia, Jennifer, the teachers and mentors who had supported Lily over the years, the other kids from the foundation who looked up to her as a role model. I didn't call my parents. I didn't call Rebecca, though I knew she would hear about it eventually through Robert. This news was for our real family, the people who had believed in Lily from the beginning, who had celebrated her talent without qualification or condition. They were the ones who deserved to share in this joy. The acceptance letter is framed on our wall now, next to some of Lily's artwork and photos from our foundation events. It's a testament to her hard work and talent, but also to the power of unconditional support. She flourished because she was given space to be herself, because she was defended when others tried to diminish her, because she saw what it looked like to fight for what matters. I look at that wall sometimes and think about the alternative timeline, the one where I had stayed silent, where I had accepted my family's terms, where I had told Lily she couldn't go to the wedding and tried to explain it in ways that wouldn't hurt her. In that timeline, what would she have learned? That she was less than, that her worth was conditional, that she should make herself smaller to accommodate other people's prejudices. That timeline would have been easier in many ways. No public confrontation, no family rupture, no years of complicated navigation around holidays and events. But it would have cost Lily something essential: the knowledge that she was worth fighting for, that her mother would choose her over comfort and convention every single time. I made the hard choice, and I would make it again without hesitation. Because being a mother isn't about maintaining peace or preserving relationships or keeping everyone comfortable. It's about protecting your child's sense of self-worth, about teaching them through actions what they deserve, about showing them that love means standing up even when it's difficult. The wedding that was supposed to celebrate love and family became instead a moment that revealed who people really were beneath their polished exteriors. My family showed themselves to be more concerned with appearances than with the actual human beings in their lives. I showed myself to be willing to burn it all down rather than accept mistreatment of my child. Those revelations were painful but necessary. 3 years later, my sister's marriage ended in divorce. David's true nature, the same nature that allowed him to exclude a child from a family event, revealed itself in other ways. Rebecca left him and moved to Portland, where she's rebuilding her life with the help of therapy and distance from our mother's influence. She writes to Lily regularly now, and Lily responds with cautious warmth. They're building something new, something authentic, though it will never be what it could have been if Rebecca had made different choices that first time. Robert married Sarah last year in a small ceremony in Vermont. It was intimate and genuine, full of people who actually cared about them rather than people who needed to be impressed. Lily was a bridesmaid, and I watched her laugh and dance with her uncle and his new wife, seeing the family we had built from the ashes of the one that rejected us. Our parents were invited but didn't attend. Robert seemed relieved rather than disappointed. The foundation continues to grow. We've expanded to 5 cities now, with plans for 3 more next year. We've helped over 2,000 young artists access education, supplies, and opportunities. We've created a scholarship program that sends talented kids from underserved communities to summer art programs and eventually to college. Every child we help is a small victory against the kind of thinking that tried to exclude Lily. I still design buildings, but now I also speak at conferences about inclusive design and accessible spaces. I tell the story of that wedding, of that plaza installation, of what it means to make public stands for private values. I talk about the importance of creating spaces where everyone belongs, where no child is made to feel less than, where worth is recognized in all its diverse forms. People always want to know if I've forgiven my family. The question reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of what forgiveness means and what it requires. Forgiveness isn't something you grant because time has passed or because holding grudges is exhausting. It's something that becomes possible when the person who harmed you acknowledges that harm, works to understand it, and makes genuine efforts to be different. My mother has done none of those things. She sent one stiff letter acknowledging they handled things poorly, but she has never truly apologized, never examined her own prejudices, never questioned the values that led her to exclude her granddaughter. She wants reconciliation without accountability, relationship without change. That's not something I can give her, because it would teach Lily the wrong lesson. Rebecca is different. She's done the work of understanding what she did wrong and why. She's examined her own complicity, her own weakness, her own failures. She's made consistent efforts to be different, to support the foundation, to build a genuine relationship with Lily based on who Lily actually is. That work has created space for cautious reconnection, though trust is still being rebuilt. Forgiveness, I've learned, is not about letting go of anger or moving past hurt. It's about recognizing genuine change and deciding whether that change creates possibility for a new kind of relationship. Some relationships can be rebuilt on stronger foundations. Others are too fundamentally broken, too rooted in values that are incompatible with who you've become. Lily understands all of this now. She's old enough to grasp the complexity of what happened, the choices everyone made, the consequences that followed. She doesn't hate her biological grandmother or the family that rejected her. She simply recognizes them as people who made choices that revealed their priorities, and she's chosen to build her life around people whose priorities align with her own values. This is perhaps the greatest gift I've given her, the understanding that she gets to choose who is in her life, that family is something you build through consistent love and support, that she never has to accept mistreatment out of obligation to biology or tradition. She's growing into a young woman who knows her worth, who expects to be treated with respect, who will walk away from situations and people who don't serve her well-being. Next week, we're flying to Guatemala. Lily has wanted to visit since she was old enough to understand her origins. We're going to see the orphanage where I first met her, now renovated and expanded with money from our foundation. We're meeting with local artists and educators to set up a branch of Beauty Without Borders there. Lily will get to see where she began, and to participate in creating opportunities for other children like her. I'm nervous and excited in equal measure. This trip represents a full-circle journey, a return to the place where our family truly began. Not in my parents' Boston brownstone, but in a small room in Guatemala City where a 3-year-old girl grabbed my hand and changed my life forever. That moment was the real beginning. Everything that came after, the adoption process and the challenges and the joys and yes, even the wedding disaster and its aftermath, all of it stems from that moment of connection, of choosing love, of saying yes to a child who needed a family and to a heart that needed a daughter. The story that began with exclusion and prejudice has become a story about inclusion and celebration. The family that rejected us has been replaced by a family we built ourselves. The pain that could have destroyed us instead became fuel for creating something that helps others. This is what resilience looks like, what healing looks like, what justice looks like when you refuse to be silent. I don't know what the future holds. Lily will go to art school and begin her own journey of independence. The foundation will continue to grow and evolve. My relationships with various family members will continue to shift and develop, or not. Life is full of uncertainties and surprises, both painful and joyful. But I know this. Lily knows she is loved fiercely and without condition. She knows she is worth fighting for. She knows that her mother chose her over comfort and convention, that I would make that choice again every single day. That knowledge is a foundation stronger than any building I've designed, a certainty she can stand on no matter what challenges she faces. That's what mattered most on that day 3 years ago, and it's what matters most today. Not the revenge, not the public humiliation of people who deserved it, not even the success of the foundation or Lily's achievements. What matters is that my daughter knows, deep in her bones, that she is precious and valued and loved. Everything else is just details. The sun is setting over Chicago as I write this, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Lily is in her studio, working on a piece for her final portfolio. Through the doorway, I can see her silhouette against the window, totally absorbed in her creative process, utterly at peace. This is what I fought for, this moment, and 1,000 moments like it. The chance for my daughter to grow into herself without shame or limitation, surrounded by people who celebrate her rather than tolerate her. Was it worth it? Every single moment of discomfort, conflict, and loss? Every burned bridge and severed relationship? Every difficult conversation and public confrontation? Yes, 1,000 times yes. Because that girl in the next room, confident and creative and completely herself, she is worth everything. She always was, even when my family couldn't see it. And I will never regret choosing her, defending her, fighting for her with everything I had. That is the story I want told. Not a story about revenge or family drama, but a story about what love looks like when it's tested, about the choices we make that define us, about the families we build when the ones we're born into fail us, about the simple, radical act of seeing a child's worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. This is my story, but it's also Lily's story, and in some ways, it's the story of every child who has ever been made to feel less than, every person who has been excluded for being different, every family that has been built on choice rather than biology. It's a story about belonging, about worth, about the fierce and uncompromising nature of real love. And it's a story that's still being written every day, in every choice we make to include rather than exclude, to celebrate rather than judge, to fight for what matters rather than preserve what's comfortable. The ending isn't written yet, but I know this much. It will be beautiful.